So, welcome to another episode of the Anxiety Relief Podcast, and I have got amazing guest for you today, which is, and I know that I may get this pronunciation wrong, but I'm going to try my absolute best. It is Eevi Niemelä. How close was that?
Almost. That was pretty close, pretty close.
Does it? So, tell us how it's meant to sound.
Eevi Niemelä. But yeah, I know it's such a horror, pronunciation for especially, I don't know, native speakers or something like that, because Niemelä.
I knew I was very unlikely to get that right, but it's always worth a go. It's definitely always worth a go. But that is my amazing guest today. It's going to be really interesting because me and Evie know each other through a little bit of work we've done together, but not like massively. So even for me, it's going to be really interesting to hear Evie's story and how she has had anxiety affect her life. And I know what Evie does at the moment. So she's totally transformed her life in this respect. So it's going to be amazing to hear how she has gone on to do that. And we're going to be lucky enough that Evie will share the stories and insights around how it has affected her throughout her life. So strap in and listen to Evie's amazing story. So, Evie, should we start with maybe a little bit about yourself, just so they kind of know what you do now?
Yes, of course. So, for people who have never heard about me, I'm Eevi Niemelä. I'm empowerment and mindset coach, and I have been coaching people this past 2 years to mainly with confidence teams, also self-belief teams, self-perception, self-esteem, and I'm literally the one who is, should I say, brainwashing people to believing in themselves and really go after their dreams and see that there is so much for them out there if they are just willing to give it a chance and see that because I don't know, it's big part of my own transformational story, which we are talking about probably quite a lot related to anxiety and related to, well, that really anxious self-perception also what I had back in the day. And now when I have built my confidence literally from zero, and I could say by now, after these 2 years only, maybe two and a half, I think this has to from me to actually build a life that I align 100%. And I can genuinely say that I actually love my life. I love myself in a healthy way. I have like this completely new perception about reality, if I should say so. And that's why I'm so keen to, help people to do the same. And you deserve to feel like this. You deserve to feel like this about yourself, about your life, about everything, that I wouldn't probably change a thing. And even the bad parts, even the anxiety parts, or like whatever has happened to me in the past, also really dark and bad stuff. Ability to be grateful for the journey, grateful all of that, because all those times also they made me me, which is quite a empowering and I don't know, lively person nowadays. That's probably the core what I'm doing. So really psychological aspect, but at the same time, of course, especially lately, related to this kind of magnetism of life, like stop that pushing uphill behavior and everything goes wrong and nothing works out kind of mentality, and actually make it more flowy by mindset work and of course, I don't know, like other things, the love attraction, manifesting, a lot of different areas. But on top of that, the actual strategy, for example, when it comes to building business and that more freedom-based lifestyle, like how to actually make that happen. But it starts with you and there's no detour from that. So yeah, I'm focused mainly the people behind the businesses and the people in general, like the core, which is you.
I love that. When I met you last year, September last year in London, you were like super energetic, etc. And I know from meeting you, and I know certainly people who watch this even more so than listen to it, they'll be listening to all the stuff you'll be doing, and they'll probably be sat there like going, she couldn't have been anxious because like I know when I met you, I never would have known that you've suffered with anxiety, although as we know, like everyone has it in some kind of way, but not everyone lets it affect their life. But I never would have thought that you've ever suffered with it because having met you now, which is obviously during the time when you're doing coaching and you're extremely like an extremely positive person, like you come across really confident and bubbly, etc. So I know listeners are probably listening, going, "No way, could she be?" Well, yeah, but that's kind of a testament to the work you've done on yourself, isn't it? And how much you've clearly changed.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Ross, because, well, I think I don't say that it's always the case, but many times it's the case that the happiest people on this planet, they're happy because they truly know what real darkness is. They really know what pain is. They know the other side of things and how important it is to appreciate literally like this everyday life. Because, yeah, and I think that's why I'm reflecting also that kind of energy because I'm just so happy every day for so many things. And just simply also, I don't know, being alive still because it eventually got that bad earlier back in the day in my life that I am seriously grateful that I am here to deliver this message. And human mind can be such a like enemy. You are your biggest enemy, or then it can be pretty much opposite. And but yeah, you are not definitely the only one that I've heard that message that like no way, like you were shy, you were anxious, you were like suffering depression, like there is no way. But well, if someone who knew me back in the day is listening to this episode, then you know, like I was pretty different at that time and I don't know, this pessimist of the year and a really, really different kind of person, I think, before all of this. So yeah, a lot of a lot of work, but I think that's just so key to talk about it and talk about it and talk about it that people could actually see that there is a way out. Like there is a way out from there. Like you can overcome these things and you can learn how to manage with these things because eventually some of those things related to anxiety, they're never going to completely go away in your life necessarily, but it's about how to learn to enjoy life despite of the fact that they are there.
Do you know what? I think what would be really good for people who are listening to this, right, is what we're going to do in a moment. We're going to go into a bit of Evie's story so that you kind of understand, what she's gone through and how the anxiety was for her. But what I want to say now is listen to that and then go and look at her content online because I know from I've seen like your videos and stuff of what you do now what she's explaining there about being grateful and enjoying life, your content online, like certainly I know I see quite a lot of your stuff on like Instagram, that epitomizes what you were saying because you always like very clearly loving life and you really do share like a really positive message. And also what's important is I know online like people can easily pretend that life is great and stuff, but yours is very genuine. Like because the amount of things I've seen you post that they might be little things, but you're like appreciative of them. That's a classic, trait of someone who actually practices gratitude. What I'd say for listeners is, and we'll go through like where you can find her online after, but certainly like listen to this and then please watch her content after because it will epitomize like no matter how bad you feel at the moment and how much you feel anxiety's taken over your life, it can be changed. Yeah, you can entirely change your mindset on life and enjoy life and love yourself, etc. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that because I think it's really, really relevant, and your content really tells the picture of what you're saying. Can you tell us about when like anxiety first showed up in your life?
Hilarious even how I would respond to that now because I feel like I've been more or less anxious person. I think it was almost like part of my identity that I am just an anxious person. And by the way, listeners, like be aware and mindful about the language that you're using because this literally like I am statement, like I am depressed, I am anxious person, which was of course like keeping it around also more or less that one itself that I was so convinced that I am just this kind of person and super worried every time, every day, worrying 24/7. And just a side note, I want to comment about that content thing because, yeah, it is genuine and people can actually feel the energy. But I've been also asked quite often, like, are you always that happy? And I reply or respond, of course, like, of course not. Like, I'm human. I have bad days, I have bad moments, and I try to be authentic also around them and show that version of me that, okay, sometimes life is hitting me in the face also. But back in the day, earlier, how would I say, for example, that, okay, like how it started to show up in my life? I mean, what I remember really clearly since I was a teenager, like I was always like having this kind of pressure in my chest and anxiety, especially related to friendships, human relationships in general, that I'm constantly doing something wrong or I'm not enough or okay, someone left me on red. What does this mean? Like, now I've done something bad, and this ongoing worrying process. But I probably should share the most remarkable times and remarkable ones, which is actually going back to those hard times of my life, like literally the hardest year of my life, like 2023, when I also hit my rock bottom. There were a lot of things happening at that time. And eventually, well, you listeners also probably know that sometimes that one last thing and that's it, like it's too much. And for me, that gratitude goes back to those times because finally I hit that low point with things that I just couldn't be. And eventually I was just like, okay, it's for sure that I'm going to die or I'm going to reach out to help. And I reached out to help, which was actually like crisis help, like a property center that I called them that I have suicidal thoughts and everything because like I just can't be, I have physical symptoms. I can't, like it was like so bad. So I'm super grateful and happy that I did at that time. And for sure we're talking about more the ways like how I got myself back there and this completely new life started. So those are also the times that kind of woke me up to this life, more or less, that I've been just, I don't know, overachieving through life, never feeling good enough, and being anxious like about everything. And especially when it comes to confidence teams or something, I need to go somewhere and, for example, speak in front of people, like that anxiety and the sweating hands and almost that I can't breathe, like this level of anxiety multiple times, I remember. Um, so yeah, really familiar fella, as I would say, in my past.
Are you happy to share a bit about this 2023 then, like this kind of worst year, so that people can get a bit of an idea as to like how it manifested, how it was building up? Because like I think sometimes people think it's like you have to have like one big event happen that is what makes you hit rock bottom, but often it's not. It's like a culmination of things, and they can be to the outside like sometimes really small things, but when you're already kind of really struggling mentally and beaten down, it sometimes it doesn't take much at all to just be that final kind of, final weight on you that it's like, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, sure. And this is actually definitely a topic that I should talk more and more and more publicly because I've been talking about it quite a lot. But when it comes to specifics, when it comes to like other things, and it's interesting, right? Because many people who hit their rock bottom, and you know, I was thinking like this at that time a lot actually, that yeah, there shouldn't like who am I to say, or who am I to experience this level of anxiety and depression? And there's no light in my world, situation because basically everything is fine. And also, uh, some people around me, they were like, yeah, but Evi, like, we don't get it because like everything is good in your life. And I'm like, why it doesn't feel good then? Like, what's wrong with me? But I think, yes, as you said yourself, like many times it's a combination and it cumulates, to this final crash, as I would say. And well, I think because of, those depression years, because also I feel like that I was depressed more or less, I don't know, since teenager years. I remember all these struggles started, and my head was such a mess like all the time because I didn't understand how my own unique brain works. I didn't understand where all those feelings and everything is coming from. Um, so of course that causes itself like anxiety because you are unaware of things because it's something like coming from somewhere. But instantly when you are able to showcase your brain, like actually this makes so much sense. But yeah, so a lot of load, possibly or more than possibly from those earlier years. And then, well, there were like a lot of reckless behavior, especially under influence of alcohol, because, well, if you don't stop and think for a moment, like where all this, miserableness and everything is coming from eventually, I felt at the time I didn't escape my things to alcohol, but eventually every time when I was drinking, so I literally fucked things up every time, as I would say, and more worrying, more problems. And, this kind of cycle was going on quite a long time actually at that time. And then there was a breakup from, I don't know, 6, 7 years relationship and a lot of dealing with that. Then other things, burnout because my university studies at that time and perfectionism and this overachieving tendency, extremely harsh self-talk every day, all the time, and feeling such a failure, friendship drama like many times. Then I think the final last bit also, yeah, I had some brief, I don't know, dating relationship kind of ish with a fully narcissistic person, like really toxic person. And so damages for sure from that. And then on top of that, I lost contact with my best friend. And it was like for young Eevi, really, really a lot at that time. So eventually my mind landscape, it was just so dark. It was just so like, what's the point? Like everyone just hates me because like these typical words like always, everyone, like it felt like that. So eventually I spotted myself thinking really, really dark stuff and pretty often. And this is something that I feel like still a bit, uncomfortable talking about because I can touch those thoughts and feelings, but at the same time, they feel so distant and they feel like how I could have ever seen myself or my life in that way. So, for example, these kind of thoughts that, I don't know, awareness that I'm living at the sixth floor and what if, or I'm driving with a car and what if. So, like, that was the darkest time of my life. And it was like that quite a long time actually before I finally made a decision, which is actually originally my friend told me that Evi, like seeking help for that anxiety. Also, when I was drinking at that time, I said quite heavily before that final crash, I used to have panic attacks, especially when I was drinking. I usually didn't remember them. Uh, but crying, couldn't breathe. I couldn't tell what's wrong with me. So yeah, shortly I would describe I was a mess. But at the same time, for people out there, for the people out there, I seemed pretty okay. I mean, I was successful in school. I was this, I don't know, popular-ish girl and pretty girl, social media, getting a lot of attention. But eventually, also I've been analyzing, my pictures later on, and you can literally tell that everything is not okay with that person. But because, heavy editing and, such a, this exactly this social media is fake stuff, like just pretty pictures and everything while I am, staying up nights and thinking like I don't know how I get up from here. Like I really don't know.
It's really interesting. There's lots of similarities to myself in what you're saying there. I mean, certainly, I've had periods in my life where I've been super depressed and suicidal, and you know, to the extent that I'd kind of thought exactly how I would do things. But like you said, it's interesting because when you've done a lot of work on yourself and you've gone through therapy and various things, sometimes it can feel very distant, but at the same time, it's almost like still within a grasp. And I do find there was a few other bits you said as well that are very similar in like the perfectionism. I've always struggled with that in my life as well, where it's you just want things to be absolutely perfect and you put in so much effort and then if it just will never live up to the ridiculous standards you're setting no matter how much you do, which that is like things like that literally feed your anxiety because you're basically setting yourself these tasks that you're never going to be able to achieve and then it sets off the inner critic mind. And that was actually something else you said about the things you're saying in your mind. Most people probably don't appreciate that unless they spend the time to think about it, the way we speak to ourselves is far worse than we would ever speak to anyone else. And like you wouldn't say half of it to anyone, let alone your best mate, but it's somehow acceptable to say it to yourself. And it can be constant and constantly dragging you down. And when you're feeling depressed and stressed and everything, it just elevates the anxiety even more. Did you have any periods where you were having like anxiety attacks or panic attacks, anything like that, or was your symptoms manifesting in different ways?
When I was sober, I don't recall that I would have had any like official like panic attacks, anxiety attacks, but especially when I started to recover, let's say it like that, when I reach out to help out of that crisis therapy and everything. And I definitely agree what you just said there about that self-talk. And oh my God, people are underestimating the power of it, like in both good and bad, because you are like feeding your own depression and anxiety and everything. And because you are so orientated and like programmed to do so, so you can't stop basically. And it's impossible to stop that cycle. And then eventually you feel like drowning. But still, I remember that summer, I used to work as a waitress, actually, always summertime and alongside my university studies. So I got really good tools to maintain or how to deal with that when that really hits the peak. Because, yeah, it was occasionally like not until the panic attack necessarily, but of course, I mean, maybe though those were, but I've got used to like a more intense way, so it's like actually visible. But when it comes to this kind of internal experience and panic attacks through that, I remember many times when I was working, just original day, pretty day, everything, but that inner world, such a chaos, or also like some bad things that I'm for sure opening about later on in life in future because, well, have to also process still maybe some elements of those bad situations, what were all part of that, tragic trajectory of how things happened. But yeah, so working there and then eventually, that thought mess started to get to so much, even though I was concentrating on my work, doing completely something else, not being in my own thoughts, but they are there. That crisis therapist advised me that I really need to do this ASAP when you feel that anxiety that it's going and it's coming like on top of you, like you are drowning in that moment. So this kind of ice therapy thing for your hands. So basically, what you are going to do, you go there near the sink, put there like as cold water as possible, and then you put your hands in there and you keep your hands there until you absolutely just can't. because and what it does, like, well, it gets you back to reality, and also this kind of pain coming from there, so it distracts those thoughts, and well, gives your nervous system this kind of shock to like now like it's time to get back to life kind of way. So I remember many situations that I just went, just out of nowhere, like, okay, I go to, back there and to the toilet. And I was just there, like standing, breathing. And then I was thinking also in my head, like, oh my God, if someone knew, about this. And this is hilarious because this is actually probably one of the first times that I'm talking about this in general. And I don't know if there are old co-workers or someone listening to this, but yeah, that's what's up, with Eevi at that time. So yeah, but I don't know, like I want to also ask you about, how you perceive this, that is it like how common in your opinion? Because many, many, many times these things are coming such a shock and surprise to people because, well, extremely anxious people, they are somehow so good masking it and they're keeping that to themselves and everything like what's going on, like actually behind the scenes.
That's a really good question. It is actually quite common, especially with people that are achieving. So you could still have anxiety and have your whole life to the outside looking completely together. And I would say probably in my early 30s, that would have been how I would have presented that actually like everything's working well, doing a good career. I was in like a response team in the police at the time. So obviously I'm going to like traumatic things that happen. And you have to be a certain way. So you have to be confident and deal with whatever happens. And there's almost this bravado within teams where it's like you're almost pretending nothing really affects you. And actually, people could watch that if they were like watching me like a movie, they would have been, like in my head, I'd have been like really cool, like Jason Statham or Brad Pitt or something. But like they would have been watching it, and I would have presented as actually like while I'm doing that, I'm I'm absolutely fine. I've got my life all together. Nothing will affect me. Whereas actually behind it, I was really struggling. My whole world was falling apart. Um, I went through like a divorce and stuff like that. Like literally everything in my life was falling apart. And every day, like when I'm finishing there, it was like, I don't know if I'm ever coming back here because I don't know if I even want to wake up the next day. And to go from that, like there'd be people that would hear that and would probably never relate that as being me because I think people probably saw me, and certainly then, like as a bit like the Joker. Like I love like having a good laugh, right? Because I think like laughing is such a good healer. But suddenly when you go from that and then you're on your own, like there was a period where I was essentially living in like a shed in my mum's garden, and so I've gone from like a three bed house with wife and kids to like I'm living in a shed, and like the way that makes you think and feel about yourself. Like I felt like I was the biggest loser on the planet, literally. And although in at times, like I could say to myself, like I'm still achieving stuff because I've got a good career and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, but my most important thing in my life is my kids, and actually I failed them. So like my self-talk at that time was horrendous, and my anxiety was just like my heart was coming out my chest, realistically. But I wouldn't have shown it in the setting I was in because of the implications. Like I was like, if I lose my job, I've lost everything. But in saying that, I think sometimes you think you hide it well, but people do pick up on it. And there was obviously various things I'd said and did around the time that some colleagues actually did then like flag and go, oh, we're a bit worried about him and that. And then eventually through that, it was like that was when I was like, I do need help. And I basically went off work for like a month, and within that month, the amount of stuff I did, I mean, it might have been a little bit longer than a month. I'm just trying to think now, but the amount of stuff I did within that time, because I basically had a few days of like the feeling sorry for yourself is the only way I can describe it. And just thinking everything's over and that. And then I think I had some random podcasts on or something, and then some clip come on by Tony Robbins, and I remember I just had this absolute light bulb moment. And then I went down like a bit of a rabbit hole type thing, and it was like I was reading things, and it was the quote that said, "If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change." And it was like it was almost like a challenge to myself at that point. I was like, well, what if I didn't think everything was bad and I just tell myself it's good, essentially, right? A bit more to it than that, but that's kind of like I was thinking, like, what if I could see things differently? And that was like the start of it for me. And don't get me wrong, like it took a long time. I think a lot of people have a bit of an expectation that they can like overcome things quicker than what they actually can. But I think as long as you're like non-judgmental of yourself, you're accepting of the fact that you are anxious and that it's okay to be that way, and that you're actually taking some actions to alleviate it and be kind to yourself, you will be able to get over it so it doesn't affect your life. Like I can quite happily say now, compared to like where I was then, anxiety doesn't really affect me. Now you obviously never um completely get rid of it because it's part of your nervous system, like your fight flight response. It is there for a purpose, but it wouldn't trigger unnecessarily, so I have that so under control compared to where it was. And I think sometimes you can almost forget actually. So when you improve so much, you can almost forget how bad it was. And then it's only every now and then when I'm either speaking to someone who's going through anxiety and I'm like, oh yeah, remember that. Or I've also had periods where if I haven't done stuff to look after myself for like a prolonged period of time because I've let myself get too busy with other stuff and I haven't done my routines, etc., that I do to keep myself in a good place, it's amazing how things will start to come back. So, and what I mean by that is I also think it's anxiety isn't something that you would just, you can just like, it's not like a ball that you can just whack with a tennis racket off a cliff and it's never going to come back, right? It's like you do need to manage and do things to keep yourself happy in life, don't you? To keep yourself feel like you're progressing. I mean, certainly my values, I love learning. So that's why like coaching is really good because I'm always learning something, always progressing. And my other ones, I love helping people. Obviously, that was why when I joined the police, that was why I joined the police to help people. So yeah, hopefully I answered your question there because I've just gone off on like a tangent for ages.
Yes, definitely, definitely. And I can, relate so much everything what you just said there. And yes, you are right. We have lots of similarities when it comes to our stories and especially that maintaining part. Like, and that's also what I meant, and that's why I want to be transparent around this. Like, of course, I have moments of anxiety nowadays and everything, but I have um, how would I say, like I'm better equipped nowadays to actually face those situations. And when it comes to that nervous system response and your amygdala, which is, that where fear comes from and anxiety origin in the brain. And when it's triggered and when it's overactive, like how I feel you must have that, and also mine, it can be also a neuropsychological thing. And it's even hilarious because I've studied, psychology all these years and everything, and still I managed to be that lost with myself. But eventually having those tools and like not just like okay, occasion, like everyday tools to okay, when I'm aware of these connections and aware of what's influencing to another thing. And that's what I meant, like how my unique brain works, because all of us, we are unique people, and what works for you and what could work for you in terms of also decrease that nervous system response related to anxiety. Because I don't know if you can probably relate to this, but eventually how I felt it, because this generalized anxiety, I would have probably get diagnosed if I would have just gone to doctor but I didn't because I was just, keeping it all to myself. So back in the day, I could say pretty easily that I had quite similar anxiety neural response and nervous system reacts and the alarm state going on well all the time, but it didn't matter if it's like, okay, my friend gave me some critic, like, or you didn't do this, or I was expecting something from you or something like this. That amount of anxiety there, or then same anxiety that something actually big bad happened. So it was so over alert, that system, like in general at that point. So I was constantly so triggered of everything, and I felt like, because also I'm super sensitive person and everything, so everything felt like the end of the world. And when you start having those kind of moments daily, like 20 times, like whether it's related to human relationships, or then you are too harsh on yourself, you didn't manage to do this, and harsh self-talk and everything. So yeah, that system is basically all the time active, which is of course like causing like severe symptoms as well. Like it's draining, it's like draining your whole life basically eventually. But when the absolute first step, as you said yourself, like how to be okay with this, and what it still exists, and be okay with that. So welcoming that, almost like okay, facing that with love, like acknowledging, like okay, I'm having this anxiety now, like where is that coming from originally, like why, what it's, what signal is that, like what it's telling me. So I think that's the most crucial part, where I also started to understand, because as said, more you can make sense to your brain, your emotional load will decrease automatically, because it's understandable. Brain has to, I don't know, create this kind of coherent picture of the world and your place in it. It has to make sense to your brain. And that's also one reason why you feel this like really utopistic anxiety about certain things, because like it's unclear, like you don't know like why. And then it usually, for these kind of people who have this tendency, or had in the past this tendency to talk in a really bad way about yourself and to yourself, it turns automatically to direction that there is something wrong in you, like it has to be something wrong in you, because those beliefs and everything about yourself, they are guiding the process to, you know, pay your attention, like yes, Eevi, like you messed up again, like
One of the other things you said was about, when you said about you're a really sensitive person, I'm like that as well. And I find a lot of the clients I work with are actually really sensitive, empathetic people, etc. And that seems to be quite a common trait I've found with anxiety, and certainly for people that have had it, like really affecting their lives. So that was really interesting. I was going to ask, there was one point where in amongst what you were saying, that when you were explaining about how like any situations could be like a bit of a trigger. Something I found I used to do a lot was almost like creating scenarios in my head and thinking of like you're trying to prepare for things so that your anxiety doesn't show up. And I'd be thinking about, oh, what if they say that, or if they do this, I'm going to say that. And I was always living in the future, because I was just trying to control things that actually, like knowing what I know now, are totally uncontrollable. But it was almost like that was a bit of a coping mechanism for me. And then obviously then someone says something completely different, and I'm like, oh my God, like what am I going to do? I don't know what's happening. I can't control this. Did you ever do anything like that similar, where you were kind of playing things out in your head and
yeah. Yeah, because that's, how also my coaching things and teams, everything started back in the day, because they started to be so new to me that actually only moment, only situation, everything, only thing that you have is today. Like not living in the past, worrying and being anxious about the past, and constantly, rolling over the situations that you can't change because they have already happened, and related to future, which is leading back to that, you know, tendency and need of being controlled. Because, well, that's also tied to perfectionism, by the way. We are such a control freaks, are we? Like, and when you don't have that sense of control, not in a dominant way necessarily, but
Mm.
control what's happening, like what if, and those what you mentioned at the start of this episode, like those what ifs, like they are such a devil, like what if this happens? Like, okay, but what if it doesn't happen? Or like trying to start a free frame that like, okay, that worst case scenario might not never happen. And it's actually quite rare that it actually would happen. Because yes, I was also feeling that anxiety by doing that and being afraid of and what could I do and what happens then? And then this goes wrong, like if this happens, then this also happens and then it, goes like a snowball and then I will die definitely. So yeah, but eventually acknowledging the fact that yes, you can change the past and you have to find your way to make peace with that past no matter what, or find learnings, find something that you got out of that, like whether it's something really, yes, through painful experience, for example, but it made you stronger or it made you think otherwise, it made you appreciate life, like for example me, like those dark times or many dark things that yes were so unnecessary to happen to me, but like at the same time I wouldn't change, as said, like a thing in my life nowadays, because all of those events, everything has had a purpose in a bigger picture. And when you embrace that, and you embrace also the part that you can't control the future, there are too many variables to be controlled, related to these what ifs and everything. So starting to reframe like that from the basics, like tiny, tiny things. Like, what if like something goes extremely well? Or what if something like whatever it is, and if you still are stuck with thinking about future, this is also a really good advice that I received at that time. That okay, since you are thinking like obsessively like about those future outcomes or something and your life will be ruined after dot dot dot, then imagine, let's sit down, acknowledge this, that okay, this is one of the billion of scenarios for the future. If it happens, like sit with them, like sit with that anxiety and face that with love. And what would I do in that situation then? Let's go this through and really think about it, even though it feels terrible, it feels uncomfortable. But again, it gives your brain clarity about that. So it's not that chaotic situation then when or if it ever happens. Then you know what you do. And then that's only thing that you can do about it is to figure out what you are going to do about it. So basically, every other aspect is out of your control. And that's just something that you have to learn no matter what to accept eventually.
That's some amazing advice there. That is amazing advice because I know from loads of people I've spoken to, and even myself, like I used to be a really bad catastrophizer in these kind of scenarios where it's like if something was going to happen, it was going to happen in the worst possible way imaginable. But you hit the nail on the head where what we find we do as humans, unless you've done like NLP and coaching type stuff, but you tend to well even then you do it every now and then, but you catch yourself. But you tend to think of something really bad that could happen. You get yourself all worked up about it, but it's almost like you start the race but never finish it because you're like going, oh yeah, this could happen. And you're quite right. It's like, okay, and if that did happen, then what would you do? And sometimes you get that response to people, they're like, well, I'll be buggered when I have this, that, and they go, no, literally, like, what would you actually do? And they'll be like, oh, yeah, I'd have to ask my mum for money. All right. And what would they say? Would they say no? Okay. So what would you do then? Or I'd have to ask my dad. What would they say? Would they say yeah, because they're actually, they're really well off and this, that, and the other. And you're like, okay, so there is an option there, right? Or
Yeah.
it's, or in other aspects, it'd be like, well, I'd have to get another job. Okay, well, you'd get another job, like, but it's if you don't,
Exactly.
it's if you don't continue to go through it, you leave it as that unknown, which again ties into anxiety. So I'm glad you mentioned that. It's a really, really strong point for the listeners there. Um, yeah, thank you for mentioning that. If you had to give one big takeaway for listeners to take from this podcast, what would you give them?
I think the absolute core message would be like be compassionate towards yourself. And if you are experiencing anxiety, it's okay. We are all humans, like we all experience anxiety more or less. So don't definitely think about that, okay, there is something wrong in me, or okay, maybe I learned some tools, but now I have that anxiety again, or something has happened or something. Because as Ross said, that's really natural human response from the whole nervous system, everything, and how we work as a human being, that it's a signal, it's a reaction about something. But in those moments when you are triggered by something small or you are experiencing anxiety, give yourself permission to feel that, but don't maybe necessarily leave it undiscovered. Because as Ross said also, and as said, I said also related to that, scary unknown future, because yeah, unknown is scary. Because well, that's also really typical brain's tendency, as I said earlier, related to that. Brain tries to keep you safe. That's why it's sending those signals to you. That's why it feels uncomfortable to start something new, go after. That's why you have those what ifs, because whatever is the situation, whether it's that anxiety situation, you are miserable in that situation, but it's familiar, so it's safe automatically to the brain. So yeah, be compassionate about those human brain and human processes, but at the same time compassionate towards yourself. And I don't know, I would have loved to hear, and I heard actually back in the day, 2023, from multiple people that I spoke with at that time, and I still remember, and I'm super grateful for those people who said to me that we are all human, we all make mistakes, we are not perfect. Like you can't succeed in this life in a way that you never made a mistake, or you never like did something, because those themes especially are really tied up to your self-esteem and your perception about yourself. And that's why it's so hard to be compassionate towards yourself, because you are beating yourself up with other things. And then there's that anxiety. Acknowledge everything, and eventually when you stop in those moments, acknowledge it, maybe welcome that, and face that with compassion, that anxiety. You might be shocked like how powerful that already is itself. And then comes the action part, like what I really can do about it.
I love that. That is a perfect way to bring this podcast to a end. If you listened to all of the podcast, thank you very much. But that last section you should listen to twice, because there was so many really key parts in that Eevi said. So please, if you're at this point, rewind that back a bit, re-listen to it, because there were some really, really big points in there, with the key theme being to not be so hard on yourself, be compassionate for yourself, be non-judgmental of yourself. Yeah, really try and do that. And there is nothing wrong with you as a person, right? It's totally normal. Anxiety is normal. It's also totally normal that you could have it and it can come back. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with you, or that you've got some special type of it that can't be resolved. It's just that what you're going through at life at the moment has triggered it, and it can be brought back under control. Eevi, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. You've been an absolute star. I know the listeners will get loads out of what you've shared, and thank you so much for sharing your story with them as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ross. It was my pleasure. Like, definitely word of part two one day, because clearly we are sharing so much, common ground when it comes to these topics. And I always love to talk about these things. And as said earlier, be authentic and be transparent, because I think that it is exactly what people need nowadays. Someone to really tell them that actually you are not broken, and it will be all better. So thank you for getting me here. It was really, really good chat.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for coming on. So, if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe to it on whatever platform it is you're listening to, and share it with someone else that you feel would benefit from it. And I'll see you in the next one.